Hello, and welcome to the International Foundation for Gastrointestinal Disorders special program on apps for GI bowel health. Today, we have with us three experts in the field. We are very proud to have with us Dr. Satish from Augusta University Health. We also have Dr. Bill Chey from Michigan Medicine at the University of Michigan, and Amanda Lynett, a registered dietitian from the Taubman GI Clinic at the University of Michigan. Today, we're just going to talk about a few of the apps that are available for patients today in managing their life with a chronic GI illness. As we all know, there are thousands of possible apps available to you in the App Store on different smartphones. And what do you get from using an app? Which one should you choose? What should you be thinking about when you're looking at all of these choices? These are questions that we receive here at IFFGD quite often. And so while we are not endorsing any of these apps or saying that you should go out and to the App Store and download them right away, we just want to let you know a little bit about the world of apps in the GI space. These four apps that we will cover today, are examples of the different varying types of apps that are available. Apps to help you track your symptoms, apps to help you better understand and educate you about your chronic GI illness, or maybe apps to help you learn more about how to choose better foods. And so today we're going to go through these apps one by one. And we're going to start with Dr. Rao. You're going to talk to us a little bit about an app for fecal incontinence. Can you tell us a little bit about this fecal incontinence stool diary app?
Thank you, Ceciel, and thank all wonderful patients whom you serve. You have such a noble mission, and it's really a pleasure to be part of your mission here. As you know, fecal incontinence is a very common problem that affects millions of patients. Survey after survey, in fact, a nice survey that Bill Chey did, and he may talk about this survey during his talk, showed that 1 in 7 Americans have this problem. 14% of Americans suffer with fecal incontinence. The challenge with the stool leakage issue is it's a silent affliction. People are too embarrassed to talk about this. People don't mention this to physicians. In a physician 800 patient survey, only a third of the patients ever brought up this issue in the course of the discussion. 2/3 went to GI offices and physicians never mentioned it. So it is a significant problem that afflicts a lot of people. And we have a very poor understanding of this problem. Generally, we as physicians and experts do manage to extract some of the information, but most people don't talk about it, never express their problems. And there is no good way of truly understanding the severity of the problem and really understanding the accuracy of the problem. So this FI Stool Diary app was one thing that we tried to develop to try and better understand and better characterize the patient's symptoms and use this understanding to better manage their problem. So that was the background.
So that definitely makes sense. And we hear from patients all the time, and you're right, fecal incontinence is really a very, very silent condition in our country. But so why would a patient need a stool diary? How does that actually benefit a patient with fecal incontinence to have a stool diary?
So what it does really is we rely on patients' recall. When we meet patients and we discuss their problem, they are trying to really base their description on recall. So when you have problems that are either intermittent, or some days they have severe problems, some days they have very little problem, but then they're trying to average all of this and in a very succinct manner, and most physicians don't have time and they try to convey all of this information very quickly, it really becomes a challenge and it's a hit or a miss. But what the app or these kind of diaries do is they really, in a chronological manner, in a prospective manner, they collect the relevant information, and the physicians and the healthcare providers can use this information to help guide patients' problem and management. So we've been using some paper form of diaries for quite some time, but what we've realized is these are very cumbersome. Patients have to carry them, they have to keep them in their restrooms and so on. And so many of them find it embarrassing, especially if there are many people use only one or two common restrooms and so on, it becomes very challenging. Whereas everybody now loves to carry a little mobile phone to the restroom. So it's quite easy to document what happened in the restroom on a simple app. So I think it really gives that privacy, and it takes away the embarrassment. And in a very quick, short time, you can collect accurate information about their bowel habit.
Very interesting. So it's a stool diary. What are some other features of this particular app? And most importantly, Dr. Rao, how easy is it for a patient to use?
So two great questions, Ceciel. First of all, let me just describe, the app, there are about like 16 pages to this app. It asks simple questions such as, oh, did you have a bowel movement or a stool accident today? Was there urgency for you to go? Were you aware prior to the bowel movement you had, prior to the accident, were you aware of any feeling for having a bowel movement? And what were you doing when this happened? How much of leakage, etc. Simple questions. These are very standard questions we ask when we meet a patient. There are about 15 items of this. Approximately, it takes about 5 minutes for a patient to complete this. So it's relatively user-friendly in that perspective. And then the second question you asked was how long, you said how long it takes to complete. So it takes about 5 minutes or so for them to fill. But the important thing is that at the end of this, the patient can keep this diary for a week, 2 weeks, whatever, and then they can actually email this diary to the physician. So the physician can have this information, or they can bring it to the clinic visit. Either way, the healthcare provider can have this information at their fingertips, essentially, to use that information to guide, diagnosis, treatment, or changes in treatment, etc.
Fantastic. So another question that we get a lot from patients is legitimacy, right? So scientific documentation about what they're using. And we do stress with so many options for websites and social media and smartphone applications that you really look for good science when you're looking to deal with your health and your quality of life. So was there scientific evidence used to build this particular app?
Yes. So I think, we used a lot of scientific tools to really develop this app. We surveyed patients to get their input in the questionnaires as we developed them. Then we actually tested this in two methods. First, we gave the same app and a paper form to healthy individuals, and we compared in healthy individuals their bowel habit. Then in patients, we had them keep a 2-week paper diary and compared this with a 2-week prospective mobile app in the same individual. And we looked at the correlation between the two. And there was roughly about 80% correlation between the two forms of diary recording in the same individuals. And then we also asked questions like which one they would prefer, how user-friendly it was, and so on and so forth. And generally, the responses were very favorable. In the FI app, if I remember correctly, I think in the healthy individuals, of course, 95% of healthy people preferred the phone app to the paper app. But in the patients, 70% of them preferred the phone app and 30% preferred the paper app. So, because in patients, we deal with a whole range of individuals, right from age 30 up to age 85. And some people were not phone savvy, so they were a little challenged. So, but nonetheless, they did answer the questions, but that was the preference they opted. So there is scientific valid information that has been presented and will be published soon.
Fantastic. Thank you. So Dr. Rao, just a couple more questions on this app. I just want to know how is the information collected? How does it actually help the patient? So what is other than tracking your bowel movement so that you can give that to your doctor, is there anything else that this app does to help patients with their day-to-day living?
I think so. I mean, let's say there are at least 5 or 6 points that I can think about. Let me think. So one, I think it provides very accurate prospective information about what is happening. So there is no guesswork here, no recall bias here. So we've accurately captured all of the information. Second, there are several different types of fecal incontinence. There is some type that we call urge incontinence. There is another one which we call passive incontinence, and so on. This diary information can help us clinically to categorize patients into these various subtypes. Each of these subtypes tell us a little bit more about what may be the underlying mechanism, and then we can use that information to really plan the treatment. Then it also helps us to identify whether this leakage is associated with diarrhea or it is a leakage without diarrhea. And that will, again, help us in managing their incontinence better. Then it also tells us, well, is this only stool leakage or there is coexisting other problems such as urinary leakage or gas leakage, or whether all of them are there in the same individual. And finally, it helps us to really give us some connotation about the severity of the problem. So all of this information then finally translates into, well, what kind of diagnostic tools should we use? What kind of treatment plan should we come up with? So we have much solid basis, objective basis, if you like, to really go and help come up with a good treatment plan for the patient. So that, I think, is the ultimate goal of this.
Right. Sounds like a way for patients to really advocate for themselves and get really involved in planning their treatment. So Dr. Rao, how can patients and providers find this particular fecal incontinence stool diary app?
So I think this, I believe, is now available on the App Store, Ceciel, for the Mac users, app users, and I believe on the Google, whatever, the Android users. So both of them, I understand, I think they were released about a couple of months or 2-3 months ago. Okay. So patients should be able to find it. If they find it useful, that'll be great, and they can share it with their physicians.
Fantastic.
But these problems people don't talk about. So hopefully this will help to educate both themselves and the physicians about this problem and get better treatment for them.
Absolutely. Being able to email those results to your physician is definitely a plus. So thank you so much for taking time to talk about this app. I want to talk a little bit more, and Dr. House talked about fecal incontinence and its app, but a lot of our dietary issues start with what we eat. And often we hear patients at IFFGD talk about dietary changes, and they ask a lot of questions about this FODMAP. What is FODMAP? My doctor mentioned FODMAP. I Googled it. I see things. And there is actually an app created by Monash University, who were the sort of discoverers of FODMAPs and sort of really started the education that we have about the benefits of the FODMAP elimination and reintroduction diet. Amanda Lynett, registered dietitian, like I said, from the Taubman GI Clinic at the University of Michigan, is here to talk to us a little bit about this Monash FODMAP app, because I understand that it's a lot of patients talk about it, a lot of dietitians recommend it, but some patients are a little concerned, they don't understand this app. Can you tell us a little bit more about this app specifically?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on today. The Monash University FODMAP app is the largest database of FODMAP foods, and it's kind of a food guide. So it breaks down the different FODMAP contents and foods by their categories. So it's like a searchable database that you can use, broken down in fruits, vegetables, grains. They even now have packaged foods. So it's a searchable database of the lists of FODMAP foods and the content within the different food categories.
Fantastic. So if I'm in the grocery store, I could just open the app and search a food, and it would tell me whether it's FODMAP friendly. But is that how it works?
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So that's, yeah.
How accurate, though, is this? Is it kept up to date? I mean, is there a chance that I might get the wrong information?
Yeah, so that's the wonderful thing about this app. It is updated, it's made, like you said, by the individuals who developed the disease, or the diet, I'm sorry, and the research team that is testing the food. So they update the app every 6 months, And so they keep up to date with the latest research and studies on the different contents of foods. So some individuals will say, well, it looks very different than another app I found online. And it's not that the other app is inaccurate, it might just not be updated. So this one, it keeps up to date. Like I said, they update it twice a month or twice a year.
So it sounds like it can be very helpful, but is it very user friendly? So is it easy for someone, let's say someone who's not as keen to apps, like Dr. Rao was saying, you know, patients come in a variety of different backgrounds. Is it user friendly?
Yeah, I believe it's very user friendly. It uses a traffic light approach, so it breaks it down with green as that food is low FODMAP, amber means it has moderate amounts of FODMAPs, and red means high FODMAPs. So it breaks down the different foods and the amounts next to it. So for example, beets at 2 beets would be green, but if you had 4 beets, it would turn into red. So it shows the different amounts even broken down per food item. It's really user friendly in the sense it also includes a shopping list, and it does include some packaged items. So it's not just your produce and your meat and your dairy products. It also does include some packaged items.
Fantastic. Are there any other features besides the listing of the FODMAP foods and the traffic light?
Yeah. So outside of just the initial list of the different foods and their categories, there's also a recipe index with, I think there's over 80 recipes on it. There's also an area where people can record, like a diary section where you can record your symptoms and your intake. I think it's about a 7-week trial you can use it. And then I also noticed there's a find a dietitian section. So it breaks it down by state, and they have some dietitians in each state within the app as well.
Very interesting. So, Amanda, as a dietitian, I know that one of the things with the FODMAP diet is that there's more than one phase. Can you very quickly talk about that and let us know, because my big question here, right, is I know that people shouldn't go on FODMAP long term. So how does this app help with the other 3 phases? But before we get into that, maybe elevator speech about what the phases are?
Yeah. So the 3 phases, you're totally right. This is not a forever diet. There's 3 phases. You have the elimination phase, you have the reintroduction, and then you have the personalization phase. So there's 3 phases to the diet. I find this app the most useful for the elimination phase because it gives you the list of the different FODMAP categories and then amounts in them. It does not individualize or it doesn't individualize for the reintroduction and the personalization phase. There is a small section on it with some tips and ideas of how to begin reintroducing and personalizing it. However, it doesn't walk you through, because everybody's a little different on how they want to reintroduce the diet, the foods. So.
Okay, and so it sounds like there's a lot of pluses to this app. Are there any concerns at all about using this app for patients who have been recommended the FODMAP plan?
Yeah, so I guess that would be the first concern about the reintroduction and the individualized phase, is that there will be patients that found the app because they were just searching, on their app store, and they do the elimination phase for a year because they're not aware of the 2nd and the 3rd phase of the diet. So they will just continually follow it. Another concern is that, it can appear at first glance to be really restrictive. So as I had mentioned previously about the different traffic light signals, the green and the amber and the red. Well, when you're on just the home page, it might show a red on a food that perhaps you can have, a half a cup of canned beets, but it doesn't appear that at home screen. It will just show red because fresh beets are higher in FODMAPs, and so it'll just show red. So for, a patient population that's already hypervigilant, it can be a little concerning because it can cause a little more anxiety for them when they're looking at it. For some people, it does cost money. It's, I think, roughly $9 to $10. So if, people are financially constricted, that could be a cost burden. And then the only other big concern would be like, there's not really a filter. So people that are vegetarian or vegan, it doesn't really break down a lot of those different filters or, a lot of specialty items.
But it does have a really, really big database. So when I go grocery shopping now, I really like to look at all the different options, but it can be overwhelming. Just out of curiosity, does it have a barcode scanner?
It does not. So,
that would be nice.
That would be nice. However, the reason it does not have a barcode scanner is because barcode scanners are based off of the food ingredients on a list. So, just all the ingredients, it scans it, it says yes or no, basically. Well, that's not how FODMAPs work. FODMAPs are kind of dependent on portion amounts. As I said previously, you might be able to tolerate a small amount of lactose, like in cheese products. So it varies. It's based off of how much content, and a barcode scanner wouldn't tell you how much. It doesn't give you the ingredient list breaking down in the recipe, right? It just gives you all the ingredients together. So that's why it doesn't include a scanner.
That makes so much sense. And Amanda, I have to tell you, I've learned so much this evening just from that. I actually didn't know that FODMAPs were based on portion sizes. So that was just a little pearl from this conversation that I didn't realize. So it sounds like instead of going to a dietitian, someone can just buy this app. Are you saying that this app can replace a registered dietitian?
Well, of course, I'm always going to promote the use of a GI specialized registered dietitian. I think they will definitely help because, the low FODMAP isn't always for everyone. Some people might still find it really overwhelming, even with the app, and they might need help customizing to tailor it for them, or a modified version, or to make sure they're meeting all their needs. Or, like I said before, if you're a vegetarian or vegan, customizing menus is where the dietitian comes into play. And then also to help with the reintroduction phase. I think that's really important, is reintroducing the FODMAPs back in and kind of personalizing it, which the dietitian, along with the app, is really beneficial, because the app, with those portions again, can show you the breakdown. And that's where people that might be a little anxious about reintroducing can look and say, oh, something's amber colored, and so let's start there on the amber amount versus going to something that's really high in red.
Right, absolutely. And you know that I was completely pulling your leg there, Amanda. We at IFFGD have a very strong understanding of the benefits of using a GI registered dietitian. We even have a dietitian listing on our website that we have compiled in conjunction with the food course at the University of Michigan, which is the only meeting I know in the world that trains registered dietitians about working with patients with GI illness. And so we really do understand the benefit of working with a dietitian, but it does sound, from what you've just told me in the last about 5 or 10 minutes, Amanda, that this app can be a really good partner, so that patients can really partner with their dietitian and take control of tackling this FODMAP diet with a little bit more security and a little more comfort level than trying to go blindly in it by themselves. So thank you for letting us know a little bit more about that app. That was very educational.
Yes, thank you.
So our third app that we're going to do today is actually taking us back to Dr. Rao, and we're going to talk about constipation. And many of you guys may know that in my life, there are many different types of constipation. The constipation dilemma is live and well. In my family alone, we have IBS with constipation, chronic idiopathic constipation, and opioid-induced constipation due to a chronic pain condition. So constipation is one of those things that can vary among individuals, and I know that personally based on my family experience. So Dr. Rao, can you tell us a little bit more? It intrigues me, a constipation stool diary. Can you tell us a little bit more about this app?
Absolutely, Ceciel, thank you. So I think like we were talking about, it is a mobile phone app for recording prospectively bowel symptoms. And again, the question really is, what is this app, and how does it differ, and what is the main purpose behind this app? And really, once again, we are really relying on day-to-day practice on patients' recall. Let me give you a couple of studies. One study done, I think, way back in the mid-90s in Omaha. Eamon Quigley's group did a study where they asked patients to self-identify themselves as constipated. And they said, well, we define constipation as having less than 3 bowel movements per week for at least 3 to 6 months. So they took a bunch of these patients, and then they gave them a prospective diary to see what happened. They found that only 45 or 48% of those patients were truly constipated by the definition. The remaining did not meet that criteria. So in other words, we have different perceptions of what constipation is. And each of us have our own 1 or 2 symptoms. And I think the Rome Foundation did an outstanding job here in helping us for the first time. And this happened way back in the 90s, really defining what is constipation. And they came up with 6 important symptoms. It's not only the stool frequency, but difficulty with bowel movements, such as straining, hard stools, using the Bristol stool scale, digital maneuvers, et cetera, et cetera. So now when we see a patient in real life, patients with very irregular bowel habits, some of them are having maybe, 1 or 2 bowel movements a week. And then they don't remember this. And they're suddenly trying to remember all of this and trying to connect with their bowel habit and explain this to a healthcare provider. It is very, very challenging. Whereas if you have something that you can keep on a prospective manner, and that is what we use the stool diary for. We used to use a paper form stool diary, and we've kind of translated that into this mobile form diary where they can keep it on a cell phone app with nice icons, which are more colorful and so on, that actually gives a little meaningful touch to the problem. And then over 16 different pages, it goes through, did you have a bowel movement today? What time did you have a bowel movement? And, were you aware when you had to go after the bowel movement? Did you feel that you completely emptied? What was the Bristol stool scale form of this? And so on. And it goes through, and did you have to take any laxatives today? If so, what kind of laxative you took? And so on. So about 15 questions. Takes less than 5 minutes for a patient to complete this. Mm-hmm. And that way you have a comprehensive prospective information. And again, very similar to the FI app we discussed earlier on, the patients can email this report to a physician or bring it to their clinic visit. And that kind of gives a very good picture, accurate picture of their bowel habit. So that, I think, is the main advantage of this.
Fantastic. So it sounds like a very interesting concept. I, totally agree that it's really hard to recall when you go see your doctor, exactly what you've been doing for the last month in the bathroom. So, keeping the stool diary, with the fecal incontinence app, you said that the results could be emailed to the patients. Is this sort of similar to that, where the results would be emailed? And how would physicians use this information?
So one thing, the physician will understand. See, there is a lot of disconnect, as sometimes patients feel they're constipated, but then most of the time physicians really think, oh, that means they have very irregular bowel habit. And then they will try and speed up the bowel movement. That's one approach we take. Whereas when they bring a diary, we suddenly notice that, hey, this person is having 6, 7 bowel movements a week. So is this constipated? Yes, it is still constipated. But the issue is the patient is going multiple times because they're struggling to go. It is not that they have a problem with stools arriving in the rectum, but it's because they are struggling with actually evacuating and emptying stool. So this kind of a diary then informs the physician, is there a problem with stool moving through the colon, or is there a problem with stool emptying? Is it a difficulty problem? So then you can then do appropriate testing for it and then develop a treatment program. Otherwise, the natural tendency for most physicians is, oh, why don't we give them a laxative or try and speed up the stool? someone is already going 6, 7 times, 8 times a week. You don't need to speed up the stool anymore, but really get to understand what's going on. Of course, you need testing, but here is the first step in understanding their problem. And this kind of helps the process much better than anything else we have.
Fantastic. And I will assume, I believe it's the same makers of the fecal incontinence app that made the constipation app. And so was the same scientific rigor used with this app as there was with the fecal incontinence app?
Yes. So we first tested the app in healthy people. About 20, 25 healthy people, completed the app, compared it with the paper form. And again, we applied this to constipated patients. About 20 odd patients completed the app. Again, paper form for 2 weeks, the app form for 2 weeks. And then we compared the variability and then the correlation between the two. And very similar to what we found in the FI app, there was 70, 80% correlation and concordance between the two apps. And then we again also asked 7 or 8 questions about the user applicability and so on. And bottom line, it's very similar. All the healthy controls, 90-95% of them preferred the mobile app compared to the paper one. When it came to patients, 60-65% preferred the phone app and 30% preferred the paper diary app. So that was how the user friendliness came up with this. But whatever, there is good, concrete, validated evidence now that this is a good measure. And this is again predicated on the fact that we developed the paper form stool diary 10, 12 years ago, and we've been using that in some of our studies and so on and so forth. So that has been validated. But this is the next step where we've been able to take this to a digital form and use this and again revalidate the digital form. So that was helpful.
Yes, that's very interesting. So any additional things that you want to tell us about this app? And I assume that it's available again at the Apple iPhone App Store and also on the Google Chrome app.
Yes,
as well.
I think it's available there, but I think there are some couple of features. One other feature that I wanted to mention. So
Okay.
of course, from a patient perspective, I know that's been the big focus of this, and we've talked about it. But there is another important component to both of these apps, which is from a researcher perspective. I know Bill Chey is listening, and there are probably some other researchers who may be listening into this kind of conversation too. And there is a research component to both of these apps, which is very useful, where you can use this information that's been collated in a prospective manner for clinical research purposes. So we can get a day-by-day detailed breakdown of the information. We can have information for 1 week, 2 weeks. There are 20, 25 questions. And then let's say there's been an intervention. Let's say we've got a new drug or a new treatment. We apply the treatment, and then we can again see what information it actually gives out. One of the challenges we have had really in really understanding constipation is defining, what is a spontaneous bowel movement, what we design as a complete bowel movement. And then a third question is a complete spontaneous bowel movement. So these are questions that we grapple with when we're doing research, but this app actually helps to break them down and provide that concrete information to the researcher in a simple manner so that they don't have to keep looking at the diaries all the time. So these are some real advantages, I think, for a potential researcher interested in this research to use this. So clearly, there is a patient application where patients can use this app. There is a physician healthcare provider application where providers can use this information. And then there's a researcher application where researchers can also use this because it's relatively researcher friendly, to actually help conduct clinical trials and develop new treatment modules for this condition.
Wow, fantastic. That's sort of the whole gamut, right? A lot of this, every stakeholder in GI Health right there benefiting from one app. Thank you so much, Dr. Rao. So we've been doing a lot of questions and answers today. We've been talking a lot theoretically about apps in the app world. And so we've asked Dr. Chey from the University of Michigan to join us today. And what he's going to do is he's going to run us through a little presentation. Thank you so much for preparing that for us today, Dr. Chey. And he's going to show us and walk us through a fourth app. And this is called MyGiHealth. And this app is an education app used to help people with chronic GI illness live day to day and be able to manage their symptoms. Dr. Chey, please explain this to us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ceciel. And I'm going to tell you about this app that we created now 6-7 years ago. And the way this whole thing started, my co-conspirator, Brennan Spiegel, who's a professor at Cedars-Sinai University in California, and I were sitting around one day and lamenting the state of the way medicine was going. That is, with the introduction of the electronic health record, the EHR, how physicians were really spending more of their time filling out the EHR and much less of their time actually interacting with their patients. And so we tried to think of ways in which we could enhance that interaction between patients and physicians. In other words, to create tools that would facilitate that interaction and hopefully offset some of the time that we lose by filling out the electronic health record. And so we actually created this mobile application called MyGiHealth. And so this was an application that we created in collaboration with Cedars-Sinai, the University of Michigan, and recently we've been working with the American Gastroenterological Association as well. And this is a research-proven tool. Actually, MyGiHealth, we published more than 10 studies utilizing this platform, actually validating it against a doctor's history. Actually, it's very interesting. The history collected, I'll talk to you about what this app does in a second, but at its core, it collects information about patients' GI symptoms. And it turns out that the history that is created by MyGiHealth actually is more accurate and easier to understand than a history written by a physician. I'll show you data from that, from a study we published on that in just a moment. It also provides comprehensive education and it provides a means by which actually patients can also assess their emotional health and quality of life. So it does a wide range of things beyond just collecting information about symptoms. So if you download this app and you go onto it, this is what you see. So it has a number of different domains, a number of different functions that it can perform. It can collect information on symptoms. Under the systems section, there's comprehensive education. There's information about FDA-approved treatments for a wide range of digestive disorders. There's a set of questions that can help you to understand your emotional health, as well as your quality of life. And then finally, additional information on specific disease states relevant to the digestive tract. So going through this, first, it turns out that a couple things. So we assess 8 different symptoms. Why? Because it turns out that research shows that almost all of GI issues for which a patient goes to see a doctor boils down to 8 symptoms. Difficulty swallowing, nausea, vomiting, heartburn, bloating, abdominal pain, constipation, diarrhea, and bowel incontinence. It also turns out that for patients with GI conditions, probably up to half of patients with one GI complaint have another GI complaint. So a lot of times these issues don't exist in a vacuum. You know, as Satish was talking about, for example, patients with bowel incontinence will almost always have a problem with either constipation or diarrhea. Oftentimes they'll also have acid reflux symptoms or heartburn. I told you about the research that we did showing that the history collected by, or the information collected that by MyGiHealth can be integrated into a history that actually is that's easier to understand and more complete than an actual doctor's history. So realize that this particular app does so much more than just collecting information on symptoms. It actually takes the information from the questionnaires that a patient completes, and it integrates it into a written history that you can actually send to or bring to your doctor. So very much like Satish talked about with the fecal incontinence app. This app, though, actually writes a history. And that's particularly attractive to doctors because the doctor can literally cut and paste the history right into their electronic medical record, which saves them a lot of time. It also is really important because here's the thing. Rather than the doctor asking you all of these really basic questions, they can read the history that you've completed for them and immediately go to the follow-on questions that will really provide them with texture on what your problem is and also how best to diagnose your condition and ultimately provide treatment. So what this does, it saves a tremendous amount of time for you and the provider and gets you immediately to the issue at hand. In the system section, you get to this page. And this page is a neat page. In fact, we took more than 2 years creating the videos or the animations on this page. On this page, patients can access fully animated and narrated videos on the different or the function of different parts of the GI tract. So for example, if you wanted to understand, what the esophagus does or the stomach does or the small intestine or colon, there are videos that will literally hold your hand as a patient and walk you through exactly what the functions are for those particular parts of the GI tract. In addition, there are animations on what can go wrong and what symptoms that can lead to. So it gives you a very simple but detailed understanding of what the GI tract does and what the things are that can go wrong that can lead to your specific GI symptoms. What's neat too is that from the history taker function that I just reviewed for you, it actually generates what we call an education prescription. So it actually provides you with a tailored set of recommendations for the animations that would be valuable for you to look at to better understand why you have the symptoms that you do. Why would that be important? Well, outside of just general interest, it helps you to do your homework before you go to see the doctor so that you can better understand the questions that you should ask around why you're suffering with the symptoms that you have. In the treatment section, we have a variety of digestive conditions for which there are FDA-approved medications. And under each of these sections, we actually provide information about the FDA-approved medications available for these various conditions. And then in the MyQ section, we have a variety of questionnaires that can help you to gain a better understanding and help your doctor to gain a better understanding of your emotional health and also issues around your quality of life. And then finally, under the diseases section, we have just relatively small number of selected diseases with information created by the American Gastroenterological Association. So we actually have highly informative, patient-centered information about a variety of different digestive disorders. We also have a message center, which you can sign up for. It's an optional part of the application that patients can sign up for to get push notifications about information that's evolving or coming out real time about various digestive disorders. And then finally, we have a find a GI doc functionality on here. So using society directories, you can actually look up a gastrologist that is a member of these organizations in your area. So you can see this app has a lot of functionality. In fact, we have a website that has the exact same functionality. If you don't like a mobile app or the mobile app, you can see that people spend usually somewhere between around 3 to 4 minutes on the mobile app. So one thing to realize is it seems really intimidating, this idea about collecting information on 8 symptoms. Well, here's the thing. You only fill out questions on the symptoms that you have. The system does not query you in terms of questions about symptoms that you don't have. And we have CAT technology, so smart technology, so that the question you're asked next is dependent upon the way you answer the question before. So you might answer 5 questions, you might answer 20 questions. It all depends on how many problems you have and how you answer each of the questions. And then the last thing, as I mentioned a moment ago, is what I think the real secret sauce of this particular mobile app is the fact that it will write a medical grade history for you that you can share with your doctor that will jumpstart your interaction. So this collects information on symptoms. It allows you to actually track symptoms over time. If you fill out the app serially, you can only do it once a week, based upon the way we have set up. But you can actually track your symptoms over time, weekly. You can learn through the education. You can prepare for your doctor's visit, both through filling out the questionnaires and the education, and you can share that information with your physician. So this is sort of a more holistic, one-size-fits-all app for a wide range of different GI problems, but it is out there, and an increasing number of people are using it. We're really proud of the research we've done with this particular mobile app. We've done what we call the National GI Survey, which is what actually Satish was alluding to, where we published probably upwards of around 15 papers now discussing the prevalence, or how commonly different GI conditions occur in the US population, and also the burden that it creates in terms of the level of suffering, symptom severity associated with a whole range of different GI conditions. That's another big advantage of collecting information on all the GI symptoms. So I'll go ahead and stop there, Ceciel, in case you have any questions or you want to take a deeper dive into this.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Chey. That is fantastic. Today we've heard about four very interesting applications, very different. The one similar thing that I've noticed about all three is that they were all created at a university with experts in the field, with Augusta University, Michigan Medicine, Cedars-Sinai, and Monash University in Australia. What are some, just to ask the three of you guys here as we're wrapping up this evening, I know this has been a long program, but I think it's very important to end with what to look for if you are looking for an app, and what are the types of things that you would think to look for in that app store, or in the maker of an app. Anyone want to take a stab at that one?
Sure, I'll start us off. I think everybody will have a comment, but I think, to me, a really critically important piece is that there is research behind it. In other words, I think people should be really careful about following people's opinions. It's fine for everybody to have an opinion, but in terms of your health, you want to be following advice that's based upon scientific evidence. It doesn't have to be like a randomized controlled trial, but some evidence that in fact what's being proposed is not only effective but safe for people, particularly if they have chronic conditions and will need ongoing care.
Absolutely. Dr. Ed, do you want to build on that at all? You're on mute. You're muted.
I agree. So I think it is a critical piece, because having scientific credibility and basis is key, because otherwise, anyone can just dream up something, and the internet is very easy to post these, very easy to collect. And sometimes, you have to be a little wary about the information that you're sharing with people as well. But a scientifically backed, validated study will give a lot of credibility. And that will ensure that hopefully this kind of information truly has an impact on their direct health. And healthcare providers, like Bill actually demonstrated in that app, it was so useful that even physicians can benefit from it. But there's so much information for the patient. They can find out where there is a GI provider. That is very useful. Many times, these are some of the calls you get, Ceciel, very often, right? You say,
Very often.
Yes. I want to know, in this state or in this part, who is someone who can take care of this GI problem. So that app actually, helps to fine tune that. There is information on treatment. And likewise, the apps that we were talking about really helps in terms of proper diagnosis, and also helps give them information, if they have started on treatment, what effects have the treatment have had. So we have more objective way by which we can assess their problem, rather than really going by recall and history, which is what we've relied on for centuries. Now we can have more objectivity and use this to improve their health conditions.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. I know that that is something that is of concern with patients with all of the options available today. How do you weed through and choose? So, Amanda, as a dietitian, I know that you're probably asked by patients every day, what's an easy way to find out? What is some of the advice that you give the patients that you see in your clinic?
Yeah, it's a great question as far as dietary approaches because, everyone can be an expert at nutrition because it's everything we do, or, everyone has to eat. If it is requiring you to buy a bunch of supplements, require a really strict plan that's removing total food groups for long periods of time, that normally brings a red flag to me. But normally, it should still be a well-balanced diet and shouldn't require additional supplementations that require like a large purchase. You shouldn't be spending thousands of dollars on supplements to follow a specific diet. And again, follow, as everyone has said, follow the research and the evidence, and trying to kind of keep in mind that diet is helping with symptom management. It's not going to cure most disease processes. So this is to help manage your symptoms. It's just another piece to the puzzle.
Wow, that's insightful. Thank you so much, Amanda. I do appreciate that. And Dr. Rao, Dr. Chey, Amanda, I really appreciate your time today in helping us to understand a little bit more about what apps can do for us and some of the amazing new things that are available through this new smartphone app technology. Thank you for your time today. Any parting words from anyone about apps and smartphone apps?
Well, I would say that, I would encourage people to read a little bit more about these apps, and if they can find a way of using them, use this. And then, they can also send us feedback, whether they were useful, if they have any suggestions to improve this, because, there's nothing set in stone. We had some initial ideas based on input and we developed it. And I'm sure users may have other useful information. We can improve these apps. So I would openly recommend that. And then, if they can send us that feedback, that will help us. And we'll collectively move forward. And our ultimate goal is to help our patients get better quickly and correctly and accurately. That's our goal. And towards that mission is where we need to keep moving forward.
And that is why you're advisors to the International Foundation for Gastrointestinal Disorders. I appreciate all of your patient focus, the time that you take to do programs like this today to really help educate patients and to move that needle just a little bit forward for all of us with chronic GI conditions. Thank you all for being here and for taking this precious time out of your day to share a little bit with us. We do appreciate it. And patients, if you have any questions and would like to make comments, as Dr. Rao suggested, please email us at iffgd@iffgd.org, and we will do our best to facilitate getting that feedback back to the makers of the apps. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you, Ceciel.
Thank you.